If you've been following this channel for a while, you'll know that I've been spending some time digging through the Wii's back catalog, looking for some cool and interesting experiences that I might have missed. And that search brought me today to Opoona, a funny looking RPG that I stumbled upon at a game store about a year ago now. Right away, this cover caught my eye, looking so different than what you might expect from a typical JRPG. It's got this silly looking cast of characters, clearly a unique art style, and some interesting details written out on the back. Simple, one-handed control. So what is this game all about? Opoona was released for the Wii back in 2008, but development started before the console even launched, sometime in 2005. It was published by Koei, but created by Art Piazza, who are a smaller team that might surprise you with their catalog. These guys were involved with lots of different Dragon Quest projects, and also developed the Switch remake of Mario RPG. I'd never heard of them myself, but they've been around JRPGs for a long time, even before they created Opoona. Throw in that unique art style, and this game is certainly a curiosity. So let's take a look at Opoona and see what it's all about. When I started the game, I thought I'd accidentally changed the settings on my Wii, but this is actually one of the few games for the console that doesn't support a 16:9 aspect ratio, so the entire game is 4:3. It definitely makes the game feel a little bit more like a PS2 game than a Wii game, but it's not a big deal. Anyway, the prologue begins with the story of Tizia, a planet that's home to the Tizian Cosmoguard, who command something called the Holy Force in order to battle dark monsters they call rogues. On another planet known as Landroll, a meteor of dark force crashed into one side of the planet, putting half of it under the control of the rogues. The other half stays relatively hospitable and is occupied by humans who live in protective domes. Many years later, the story picks up with the titular Opoona, a young Tizian that lives with his family on a spaceship, traveling to Landroll to visit his family. He lives on the ship with the crew, his parents, his brother Copoona, and his sister Polina. Despite the game's childlike exterior, there's actually a lot of information to pick up right away. But just as you're getting the ropes, a ship is attacked and the three children are sent down to the planet's surface in escape pods. Opoona wakes up in Tokyoone, a city on Landroll. His mission now is to find his family, gather Matia, some sort of energy/currency of Landroll, and learn to become a ranger who patrol the wilds of Landroll and fight off rogues. There's a lot more to it than that, but I'll spare you the details for now. As it is, Opoona's introduction is, frankly, a bit too long for me. There are heaps of information that are almost entirely delivered to you through text without much visual guidance. And for now, it involves a lot of exploring Tokyoone and getting things explained to you by its citizens. Eventually, you'll run into Goldie, who leads all of the rangers across Landroll, and he'll explain that you can become a trainee by acquiring a license. That leads you to Chaika, that one girl from the cover, who takes you to the dome exit to get you started on your first job. The wilds outside of the domes might look safe, but they're teeming with rogues, which function as the primary encounters in Opoona. Only rangers are allowed outside in order to handle them or accomplish other research tasks, and Opoona's given a quota to defeat 10 rogues, meaning we can explore a little bit. With the advertised one-handed controls, Opoona might seem like it's incredibly basic, but that's not necessarily the case. Running around, opening an inventory, and interacting with stuff is pretty much the foundation for any JRPG, and plenty of games have proven that you don't really need the other buttons to accomplish the same idea. The thing is that this control setup really messed with my head after decades of using regular controllers. My left hand moves and my right hand hits the buttons, but in Opoona, one hand is meant to do it all, and the Wiimote only seems to change the camera angle. This confusion continued for quite some time until at one point I just swapped over to the classic controller, which is also supported, which made things a lot easier for me. The two control schemes are functionally identical, but the form factor of a classic controller and the ability to move the camera with the right stick was just so much more comfortable and let me do things more efficiently. I find it really hard to just play an RPG without a D-pad. Menuing and stuff like that is just strange on a stick for me. So this gimmick that I thought would make the game more interesting, I ended up opting out of within the first couple of hours. Fights in Opoona look a lot like a typical turn-based RPG, but they're actually more like active time battles in Final Fantasy. There aren't any actual turns, and you can act whenever your energy meter is full. I think enemies have similar restrictions, but they tend to just attack whenever they can. Opoona can use items, magical abilities known as Force, or do a default attack throwing the energy ball on his head, what they call a bonbon. You can put equipment on your bonbon to improve or change its properties as well, but that doesn't really come up until later. Attacking and using magic will use a part of the energy meter, with bigger attacks taking longer to charge. Early on, I didn't have many abilities, but the basic attack is actually one of the more unique aspects of the combat. To start an attack, you push the stick in any direction, which begins charging based on your energy. The more energy used, the faster the ball will move, and I think it has some effect on the damage dealt as well. But the angle of the stick will also have an effect on the spin of the ball. It's sort of like a baseball pitch, and you can use the angle of it to throw down to hit enemies on the ground, or to avoid hitting an enemy that's hiding behind another one. You can use this to roll a ball in front of you to hit an enemy that's trying to attack, and later there are also bombs that you need to avoid by hitting a curve. It's a really simple concept, but it keeps things interesting for the majority of the game, especially when you eventually find the item that allows the bonbon to pierce through enemies. Hitting a row of rogues at once was always really satisfying, and I never got tired of just trying to line up my shots. Compared to the relatively simple Force magic abilities, the bonbon has a lot of depth to it. So after completing the first mission out in the wilds, Opoona gives you a moment to explore Tokyo a little bit and get a grasp on the city. But Tokyo, the city, is absolutely massive, with huge sprawling areas full of elevators and hallways that I personally found incredibly difficult to navigate. After being given a faster way around, you're sort of meant to just figure out the layout, given instructions by these people at this desk, but these locations just aren't laid out on your map. Later areas would actually end up being easier to navigate, but Tokyo felt like a maze that I never truly felt I had a grasp of. What compounds with the layout of this area is that early on you need to find out where to even accept a mission, who to talk to about the mission, and then find your way back outside of the dome. Moving from one location to another often involves deciphering these icons on the walls and to find out where exactly these elevators are meant to lead you to. I try to talk to an NPC to get an idea of what to do or where to go, but they'd rarely be any help, in no small part due to the game's pretty shoddy translation. It isn't completely indecipherable, but there are a lot of lines that are just written in a strange way that makes it harder to understand what they're actually trying to say. Coupled with how static the conversations feel, I'd often sort of just zone out and not really pay attention to what was going on.
Oh hey, Copoona's back.
The game just throws so many titles, names of places, and characters at you in such a static and slow way, I found it really easy to just not really pay attention. And it's sad to say all that, because Opoona does eventually give you an opportunity to appreciate all the cool, charming stuff that it does have. Landroll is full of bright, clear skies mixed with shiny chrome interiors and colorful graphic design. Even the map design, as much as it confused me at first, would get easier to navigate once I learned what these minimalist icons were meant to imply. I really grew to love that mid-2000s aesthetic that Opoona has. I might have called this video the Frutiger Arrow RPG because it truly does feel like that. Just with all the blue glass and glossy metal elements, it's obvious the team behind Opoona was looking at modern design from the time and trying to implement it into their world and characters. Speaking of the characters, I have to shout out how completely out of place Opoona and the rest of the Tizians look. I can't say I know many JRPGs that star those little tyke bean guys that I would see in Toy Story, but here we are. Jokes aside, they've got a lot of character to them, and it's pretty charming how Opoona puts on a determined face when you're running around. It's all just very silly. But I think my favorite aspect of Opoona's design is seen with the rogues. Considering most of them are just basic enemies that you fight in battle, the rogues have a really great variety of designs. You've got stand-ins, of course, for things like slimes or bees, but they're often done in a distinct way that keeps them from being copies of the usual JRPG enemy list. You'll do battle with rocket ships, giant long-necked dinosaur things, and angry TV screens in Opoona. In general, Opoona just has a deep love for art and design, to the point where you're literally looking at art pieces scattered across the world to raise an art stat. When I first noticed that this stat existed, I thought it was a silly afterthought, but there are actually so many of these around, and it keeps track of them in your menu. All of the marketing stuff I found for the game as well just fits that Wii look, that Wii era very well. I also really like the logo. Really, everything in Opoona just has that mid-2000s clean sci-fi aesthetic that you'd see in all sorts of places. You can call it Frutiger Arrow, I don't even know if people still use that term, but you know it when you see it. For a large portion of the game, there's a predictable cycle. Go and complete a job outside the dome, return to submit the job at a desk, and then stumble around the dome until you find the next checkpoint to do another task. This is all in an effort to rank up the ranger license that you're given, while forming friendships with citizens and doing odd jobs for them to get licenses to do other jobs as well. From Tokyo's dome, you'll go to Lifeborn, followed by Artiella, followed by the Intelligency. The idea being that each dome specializes in its own specific type of thing. But I hate to admit that a lot of these domes just sort of blended together in my mind because you're not actually traveling between them and you're just taking these pods that teleport you to them. As much as I did enjoy exploring the outside of the domes, the repetition of the jobs would just get pretty monotonous, and it genuinely felt like you're just kind of doing a job. I think a big part of why I feel like this is that there's a lot of time wasting between jobs where you'll have to go get a license and then get it upgraded at a different desk, and then walk all the way to the next area to have a new person explain to you what to do. It's like unnecessary bureaucracy in a video game. It's weird. At one point, I had to prepare fast food, and another, I was awkwardly chasing ferrets around a desert, but other than just progressing through, it didn't feel like I was getting any meaningful rewards for this. Completing tasks will raise a certain person's friendship stat, which is tracked in your menu, so it is the intention that you're supposed to meet these people and do fun little jobs for them to earn their trust. And while the minigames aren't bad in a vacuum, I couldn't tell if these were mandatory or if I was just getting lost. While playing through and exploring, I'd encounter something like these rocks that I knew would have to be related to a job quest, but have no idea who to even talk to get it started. So soon enough, I was tired of trying to figure things out and just wanted to see what happened next in the story. As much as I had problems with Opoona so far, the game does get better over time. After a boss fight in a volcano, the next ranger job allows you to reunite with your brother Copoona, who's being trained by the sages of Landroll. Opoona is tasked to protect him, so he joins the party as a second playable character. Fighting alone as Opoona could be pretty slow at times, but having the extra teammate gives you a lot more to do. Opoona is your main damage dealer, but Copoona is a support and spellcaster. He learns better force attacks than Opoona and gets some improved healing magic as well, and it really helps balance out your team. There are also these spirits that you've been rescuing throughout some of the missions, who occasionally will show up in a battle, and if you hit them with your bonbon, they'll do a spell and do some extra damage for you. After the two of them discover their ship's crash site, Copoona pretty much stays in the party for the rest of the game. This is about where I started to really get into the swing of things. Opoona at its best can be a fun, simple adventure where you get to explore the world and have fun fighting battles. As long as the job system wasn't confusing me and getting in my way, I managed to find that comfortable JRPG flow. To be fair though, this is about the time where I stopped paying attention to the plot all that much. The sages get you to recover something called the spirit poem, and then I had to do this really annoying fortune telling game, and then some lady dies, but the overly simplistic scenes didn't do too much to grab me. But even if the main story is pretty lacking, there's a lot of small details and little things that are hidden around Opoona that show that this game has a lot of heart to it. Anytime you arrive at a new dome, you're given a chance to take a bunch of photos and then pick which one you prefer for your passport. Small, silly stuff like this keeps Opoona from feeling like it's completely lifeless, because those cutscenes are very stilted. Sometimes that works in the game's favor though, like when you're walking down this hallway and the butler guy that's been helping you so far is struck by lightning and disappears. Turns out it was actually some sort of robot guy and he'll be okay, but that's just the strange sort of things that this game does, and it's hard not to love. Generally speaking, this stretch of the game is just really solid. My objectives were clear, the combat is fun, and the new areas like the Brave and Shine companies are pretty fun to explore as well. There's nothing too complicated here, it's just a fun adventure where you get to meet people and do stuff, and sometimes that's perfectly fine, even if I got lost again. After your ranger job is done at the Intelligence Sea, Opoona has made it to a 4-star license, which allows him to fly up into Sanctuary. From what I understand, Sanctuary is the home of the sages and a place that only elite members of Landroll are allowed to access. It's also mostly a stopping point between the domes and Paradiso. Paradiso being the sort of retirement plan heaven thing that exists for people that complete all of their quotas in Landroll society. At Sanctuary, Opoona and Copoona find Izol, the leader of the sages, who's been sick lately, but soon enough he's feeling better, and the two are taken up to perform the Paradiso ceremony. And then they get smacked in the face. After whatever that was, the game finally shows what happened to the last Tizian sibling, Paulina. She was discovered on the coast and rescued by Goldie, who's convinced to leave her in the care of a lady named Criolla. Some time passes and Paulina wakes to the news that something terrible has happened to her brothers. Criolla provides her with a disguise, Opoona's stolen OMP and licenses, and then sets her off. The Paulina segment is a lot of fun and a much needed change of pace. Nothing has really genuinely changed, but running around as a new character with a slightly different set of tools is so welcome. The save screen doesn't actually show any timer or hours counted as you play the game, and instead just shows days, measured in ALL or after Landroll landing. The number only really rises when you hit certain story beats or when you decide to go to sleep. I was at 22 days by the time I reached Sanctuary, but Paulina starts a month later, and I gotta say, I really love when games can take a simple number and change it just to create a little bit of storytelling. Seeing a big jump in the days when I saved was actually surprising because I'd gotten so accustomed to watching that slow number count up by the time I got to that point. Paulina ends up finding her brothers at Paradiso, who have been brainwashed to forget what brought them there. Nonetheless, she manages to convince them to come back to the cabin where Criolla is. Criolla reveals that she is Izol's mother, and that there's a twin brother locked up in a place known as the Earth Prison, who might be able to help Opoona and Copoona. Chaika shows up and also decides to join Paulina as a second party member, but they're not controllable. Paulina isn't as strong as Opoona and not a sage like Copoona, but she has the ability to hear the words of fairies and spirits. In combat, she seems to have a mix between the two of them, with decent attack power and some good area of effect abilities. Truly, for me, the best part about this segment of the game was that I didn't have to worry about jobs or licenses. But this section just made me feel like all of the compelling locations and story were stuffed into the back half of Opoona. The first half is full of so much backtracking in the domes, and most of the wild areas were forests and caves, but so quickly in the second half, you've already got underwater caverns and giant tree villages and stuff like that. That's just so much more interesting. Paulina's mission here only lasts a few hours, but it felt so much longer to me because there's just so much more going on. Thankfully, you'll come back to most of these places as Opoona pretty soon. All of this leads to the Earth Prison that's holding Shagla, who teleports Paulina back to Criolla's cabin. When I was writing the notes and script for this video, I didn't feel like the names were that ridiculous, but reading them out has been a trip. Anyway, it turns out Criola's basement was an elevator to what they're calling the Partizan hideout. The Partizans are like rebels that are aware of the truth that Izel's been corrupted by the Dark Force and are trying to do something about it. Also, there's an evil lady called Babushka, and Also, there's an evil lady called Babushka, and you finally meet your uncle Roydman there, who's been working with the Partizans, and there are just way too many names to keep track of here. Bottom line, Izel was good, he's bad now, Opoona and Copoona are safe now, and they have to work together to defeat him. And then Goldie shows up to fight you because he's loyal to Izel and Babushka or something, and he beats you all up. But then the spirits intervene to help you clear her heart of darkness, and you beat him up. Truly, the entire story begins here, 10 hours into the game. The game started pretty slow for me, but from here on it felt pretty good. You travel into the wilds to gather the remaining spirits into a mountain cave to get the earth spirit, and then venture further out to find the water spirit. A lot of this area of the map is designed in a sort of linear fashion where you just walk to the next major area, but it works out. On the way to the temple there, you get this really awesome forest path though, with these giants hanging around. And now that you finally have 3 party members, you can handle the really powerful rogues there. I absolutely loved this area with the music and the vibes with these really abstract giants there asking for your help. It's all very magical and mysterious and something I didn't really expect to feel from this game. I haven't mentioned it yet, but the music in Opoona is consistently great. The composer from Final Fantasy Tactics and loads of other really great RPG soundtracks was a part of the team working on this soundtrack too, and it's all just very easy listening. I would recommend checking it out for sure. When Copoona joined, things were speeding up a little bit, but having 3 characters at once, along with much larger waves of enemies, meant the battles were a lot more exciting from this point on. Even if I felt like there were a lot of spells in the game that aren't worth using, it felt good to coordinate who was healing and attacking. All 3 of the Tizians start to learn some really strong moves that let you wipe out large groups of rogues at once, though managing your FP resources becomes a bit more of a concern. Especially for Opoona, whose FP pool is generally pretty small. After fighting a sage that turns out to be a double agent in a decently fun boss encounter, the final spirit is yours. Doing so helps the nearby town that those giants wanted you to save, and the chief there tells you that you need to gather a group of 7 partisans who can help you travel to the dark side of the planet to stop Izel and Babushka. There are 7 energy cocoons that need someone present to activate, so 1 partisan each. Opoona can only involve people that he's built a close relationship with, which equals out to about 5 friendship points or higher. So it's time to travel the world, perform a ceremony with the spirits to gain their power, and recruit 7 friends to make the trip to the Dark Burrow on the other side of Landroll. This all seemed simple enough to do. The meditation tower is just a bit further down the path from the temple, so completing the ritual was pretty easy. Mendel and Musseltis, who helped me get to the water temple, were already friends, so that took 2 off the list right away. I picked up Joey and Kashira from the wilderness town of Animos, who were already close to being level 5 friends, and that didn't take long either. When I got back to the domes, I found Ted, who is the kid that gives you the hoverboard early on, who ends up in a hospital at Intelligence C later. I just happened to have the herbs to heal his condition on hand, so he became the 5th partisan. But this is where everything went wrong. The list in the menu doesn't provide any real information on what they want from me or really where they even are, instead just showing where I met them and a picture of them. And after over an hour of just trying to locate these characters, I ended up having to pull up a guide. This isn't the first time I needed a guide to get through Opoona, since I would get lost so frequently, but I'd have absolutely no chance of actually finishing the game if it wasn't for this one I found, written 15 years ago. First, I tried to recruit Mira, who I met at the Tokyo Ranger Academy early on in the story. This meant getting completely lost in Tokyo again, and I ended up bumping into a character named Masao instead, who will become your friend based on how much art you've seen. Turns out I didn't have enough art points, so he was a dead end. Mira's friendship requires you to watch some TV on your OMP and answer questions about it, but just before I reached level 5 friendship status, I hit another dead end because I just couldn't find where they went. There was an identical girl NPC sitting on a bench that I thought was her, and only realized later on that it wasn't. So I just wasted a lot of time thinking I needed to wait around or do something. It turned out that I needed to find a vacuum hose to do this quest, which I could only get if I had already done an unrelated mining quest. That led me to a part of the Lifeborn Dome that I'd never even been to meet a guy who could install a drill to my hoverboard. So I went around mining rocks looking for the vacuum hose, which I could use to get a sweeper license so that Mira could be my friend. I did a bunch of vacuum minigames to rank up that license, and the lady that employs you ends up knowing Mira, which lets you be closer to her. And that's just one example of how many layers of licenses, jobs, and quests I had to unravel just to get the last few friends I needed to finish the game. And the fun didn't stop there. After doing much of the same running in circles to get my 7th Partizan, it turned out that I wasn't fully prepared to go to the Dark Burrow. I was under the impression that the teleporter in the hideout was ready to roll once I had my squad, but it turned out that I also needed to find out how to ride an Oracle Fin, whatever that was, to get to the burrow by myself. What's an Oracle Fin? Well, it's the reward you get for completing an entirely separate fishing side quest that I just didn't do. And in order to ride one to the final area, I had to completely finish the Seamaster license. This license, as far as I know, is the only one in the game that you're required to completely fill out to beat the game, and I never even saw it. So it's back to the grind again. This time fishing for hours to complete my quota until I was given access to a boat at Intelligency to begin the hunt for my white whale, a fish they call the Legend that's supposed to live in the waters of the dome. Catching this fish would prove that I'm the Seamaster and I could finally ride the Oracle Fin. This meant another 2 hours of moving in circles, catching random fish until the Legend showed up. You can't run away if you encounter the wrong fish, and if you don't catch them, you lose your bait and you need to buy another one. The Legend, when you do run into it, is no slouch either. You catch the fish in the same way you would fight other enemies, but you have limited health and can't use items or spells. So you have to be really precise with your shots to make sure you kill it before it kills you. And to add on to that, the scale you need from the Legend isn't even guaranteed. If you catch the fish, there's a high probability that it'll leave you with nothing. I had to repeat this process of maybe finding the Legend, maybe winning the fight, and maybe getting the scale dozens of times before it finally gave me what I wanted. This took hours, and I caught the Legend about 15 times before it finally gave me the scale. Needless to say, this all just brought the game to a screeching halt. It's such a struggle trying to figure out what licenses I needed to do, to get other licenses, and then they just capped it off with this mind-numbing mandatory fishing quest. Because of how much I had avoided side quests during the main game, gathering the final few Partizans took me over 7 hours. I have yet to play a game on this channel that had me so confused and honestly annoyed, despite how much I was enjoying it just a few hours ago. Every time I would think I had done enough to get to the end of the game, I would realize that I was missing another thing and have to look back at the guide in order to figure out what to do. And I really hate being so negative about it because I was genuinely enjoying that middle portion of the game, but getting brick-walled so hard right at the end just completely killed my momentum before I went into the end of it. A lot of games around this time tended to do this, where you have to complete a bunch of tasks to get to the end of the game. Metroid Prime does it, I think Wind Waker did it, lots of stuff does, and it's never fun. If I'd known earlier, maybe I would have made the effort to do a lot of these side quests along the way, but as it is, they weren't really fun to do in the first place. And once I'd gotten the 7 Partizans and thought I was ready to finish the game, to drop that whole fishing thing on me was genuinely heartbreaking. Finally though, the Legend gave me its scale and I could at last ride the Oracle Fin to the Dark Burrow. The Dark Burrow itself is a perfectly serviceable final dungeon. It's noticeably larger than some of the other temples and dungeons in the game, and despite the struggle to gather the Partizans, I did feel pretty bad when I realized the energy cocoon meant strapping them into these horrible contraptions. At this point though, Opoona hasn't felt difficult in quite a long time. Opoona is doing so much damage, and the healing output between Copoona and Opoona is way higher than anything the rogues could do. Soon enough though, the team makes it to the Dark Bonbon and faces off against Isol. The only major concern for the final boss was a lack of FP to maintain the healing, but Opoona's basic attack hits like a truck, and Copoona's spells destroyed all of his shields instantly. That leaves Babushka, who fights with this set of 4 leg things. This battle seemed hard at first, but then I realized I could just curve my shots around to hit them, and it's also pretty easy. The laser form stressed me out a little bit, but they actually didn't do that much damage. Opoona, I don't think was ever meant to be a super challenging game, so the last battle is perfectly fine. With the threat defeated, the Tizian's Holy Force allows their darkened hearts to heal. With that, the Dark Force begins to disband. The sages hold a funeral, and then Opoona's family is able to reunite. He wakes up on a reconstructed ship traveling in space. With everybody saved, they can finally set off back home, bringing us to the end of Opoona. When I made it to the credits, I had a moment to think about the game as a whole. Opoona is far from perfect, and I don't even know if I would really recommend it to people, but it's definitely worth checking out from an artistic standpoint, and there's a lot of cool and interesting things about it. It's full of creative designs, some fun ideas, a lot of heart, and some really good music. I really came to like how much it clearly loves art and design, and how much it wants to share the idea of making friends in a new place. And I think that, if it was implemented a bit better, would have been really cool to see. There's a lot of really good here, but I think it's hampered a bit by its age and its budget, but I could always kind of just make it out through the fog. The structure of the game is way too obtuse for me, with some honestly rough level design and just a really weird, tedious job system. I don't think I would return to this one anytime soon, but I can say that I enjoyed it for what it was. Some time ago, they actually brought Opoona back to a Warriors crossover game of all things, which I thought was pretty interesting. Somehow he doesn't look any more out of place here than he does in his own game. But sadly, Opoona's never shown up in anything ever since then. I think it's obvious that the people that worked on Opoona probably had some fondness for him. And as much as Opoona would probably never get a sequel, I bet if they had the chance, they could clean up a lot of things and make a decent little game. I think this game's gonna be stuck on Wii forever, and that sucks, but, you know, what can you do? I'd love to know if you've even heard of this strange little game, and if you have, let me know your thoughts on it. Maybe you had a better impression of it than I did. Thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. If you enjoyed your time here, leave a like on the video, a comment, and feel free to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more stuff like this in the future. That button barely works, so you probably want to hit the bell too. If you like videos on cool niche retro games, this is the spot to be, so stay tuned. Once again, thank you for watching, and take care.